Welcome to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a trauma therapist, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado-based therapy practice, and a creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice as we share our journeys and show support as we learn more about ourselves and life. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas we haven't sat with before. I hope that we can work on this journey of personal growth and understanding together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we can talk about difficult or activating topics. So maybe put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. Today I am joined by Julia Viani, a psychologist with a feminist perspective specializing in systemic therapy, ethical non-monogamy, and sexology. Julia, who lives in Spain, works with all identities and experiences with a focus on community building and fostering safety. Julia has over a decade of experience, and you can find her on social media at julia.viani. That's Julia_Viani. And I personally was lucky enough to connect with her on Fam Connect. This is an LGBTQ plus app for professionals and business owners in the queer community to connect and collaborate with each other. And I'm so grateful that we did, because I love this episode and I cannot wait for you to listen to it. We explore relationship structures, what it means to break free of this concept of what is normal, how to build community, and how to increase safety for ourselves and others. This is really important right now, and this episode is releasing during Pride Month, which I am so excited about. So let's get started and see if we can build some insight today. Welcome to Insights with Us.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here as well, and I'm very excited for this conversation that we're about to have and see where it takes us. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I was
Same.
wondering if you could start a little bit just talking about who you are, where you are, kind of what your context is for today.
Yes, of course. Well, I'm Julia, like you said. I am Spanish and I'm currently in Spain. So I think it's good that I say that even though I'm very comfortable in English, it is not my first language. And because I am Spanish and I also live here in Spain, I'm very used to using certain words or expressions in Spanish that come out of me without me even realizing usually. So for whoever is listening and doesn't speak in Spanish, don't you worry if I say some of those words. Either they're not important at all, or I will, of course, translate myself. It's just like I don't think about it, and it just happens. So there's that. And I am in Spain. I live in the outskirts of Madrid. I am in the countryside, actually, in a madhouse that we built. And yeah, I don't this broad question of who are you? It's like I don't know. I'm a therapist. I'm a woman. I don't know what to say.
Mhm. Well, wait, I have a follow-up question, Julia, about
Go ahead.
Spain. What made you choose Spain? Like, are you always from here? Have you always lived there? Did you land there for a specific reason?
I am Spanish, but I grew up in a different place, not in Madrid. I did spend many years of my life in the outskirts of Madrid, somewhere else. And then I traveled for a few years, kind of like being a nomad for a few years. And then at some point after that, I was like, or through that, I guess, I started missing being in just one place, especially because of community. And I was also spending a lot of my energy and time into things like where am I going to sleep tomorrow and stuff like that, which is super fun. And I loved it for a very long time. But at some point, I was like, okay, I need to settle down for a little bit at least somewhere so that I can put my
Yeah.
energy into different projects. And I was like, okay, I left Spain. I left Madrid in particular, universe anywhere but Madrid. And the universe was like, did you say Madrid? Here you go. So I was looking for a job. I landed here because I got a very good opportunity work-wise. And yeah, then I fell in love with the place that I live in the
Mhm.
outskirts and stuff. So for now, I'm staying here. We'll see how long it lasts.
Okay, okay. And you said that you wanted that stability, that kind of one location so you could focus on your passions. What are
hmm
you passionate about? What are you working on?
It was mainly work, honestly, in this world that we live in. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I am very passionate about my work. I'm a psychologist, I'm a therapist, and I work especially with people that need a systemic view or, yeah, kind of a way of working that is systemic, so that it doesn't only focus on the individual and like in the intra psychic stuff, but rather focuses on how we're part of different systems and how those interact with the person and each other and all of that. And I also focus on queer people and non-monogamous people mainly. And so I'm very passionate about those things. I also have other passions that have nothing to do with work, but I tend to merge all of those things
I
together.
understand that. I understand that.
Mhm. Yeah, can you relate?
Oh, yes. Yes, I can definitely relate. Everything I talk
Mhm.
about, I think eventually finds its way back to the human mind
Mhm.
and therapy and just different concepts and this because we're all human and we need
Yeah.
connection. And so it is all related to this work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also the kind of job that we have, right? Maybe we had a different job. I don't know. I wouldn't know. But maybe we had a different job. Our focus could be in different places. But in this, yeah, everything goes back to it, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I wanna hear more about all of it. Let's be real, all of it.
Hmm.
But where my mind is currently going is the systemic work.
Hmm.
And maybe if you notice similarities or differences between queer and non-queer identities. Is there a
Hmm.
difference in that, or does it kind of overlap and feel similar?
That's a very good question. Thank you. That's very interesting.
Take your time with
No,
it.
I feel that there is a main difference between queer and non-queer folks. That is that queer people are not seen as normal. And yes, I use that awful word. And that puts all of us queer people in kind of a different reality, even though we are in the same world than people that are not queer. And that can happen with many other things. It doesn't have to be only with queerness, of course. It can happen with race or with abilities or with, I don't know, the money that you have in your account and many other things. But because your question was about queer people, I'm going to answer to that.
Yeah.
Um, and in the, yeah, in the systemic part is that is a difference that we have. We're not seen as the normal, and that becomes, I don't know, it can become many different things, but it can
Yeah.
entail like some more difficulties, but also some particularities that can be very joyful,
Hmm.
that other people may not have or not in the same way.
Yeah. Say, this is resonating for me, and I'm curious if what I'm about to say overlaps with your experience in Europe compared to, me over here in the United States doing this work, where we are all human. We all need connections. We all need love. We all need validation and acceptance and the ability to show up as ourselves. But because, people who identify as queer and, all the other identities you just named as well aren't seen as normal, it's like there's this expectation that we're supposed to be different, that we're not supposed to need it in that way. And there is so much more isolation and trauma around community building and relationships that it isn't just let me help you figure out how to connect. It's let me
Hmm.
figure out how to heal so that you can trust that connection.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that community is so important. And it's something that is not so easy to find being a queer person sometimes, or you don't really know like how to start, especially if you are embracing your identity as an older person, maybe. Maybe it's not especially, it's just the experience that I have with my clients, I don't know. But I've seen like so many adults that yeah, couldn't, for many reasons, couldn't embrace their queerness when they were younger, or they didn't have the
Mhm.
space, or they didn't even know that that existed, and they just felt a little different, or whatever else. And then it's like, okay, so my best friends or my family are cool or not, or whatever, but they don't share this part with me, and I don't know how to relate in this particular way, no, or like how to show who I am, without having to explain for example, certain things, no? And I think that community is so important. Like you were just saying, like we all need connection. And I think we also need many different kinds of connection. And sometimes all of those kinds or many of those kinds can be with just one person or two people or three. But some other times, no. And we need more people that we can feel identified with or trust, like you were just saying, no?
How do you normalize that? How do you build that within yourself, but within your clients?
Um, Again, meeting more people that you can feel identified with.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a long process, sometimes it's super hard because you don't live in a big city, and how do you do that?
Hmm.
But luckily, or not, but in this case, luckily, we also have the internet. Like
Hmm.
we can have this conversation right now because you are in one part of the world, I'm in the other part of the world, but we can still connect. And sometimes online communities can be very good for for many things. And yeah, I think that's it. Like meeting and getting to know and connect with people that you feel that are like you, whatever that means. That you can
Yeah.
understand each other without having to explain so much.
Hmm. Yeah, this like underlying acceptance of I see
Yeah.
you and you can be who you are.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Which is part of the queer joy, right?
Yes, yes, it is. I love
Mm.
it. Um,
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I would like to ask you, like, how are things in your experience and the people that you're seeing, and maybe also yourself, if you'd like to share, with how things are in the States right now, and especially like against queer people.
there is so much fear.
Mm-hmm.
I find a lot of my work in relation to that is being that safe person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to give into the panic and the fear and the chaos that you kind of lose your footing. You can't be as grounded. If everyone in your community is also freaking out, it's just going to get bigger and worse, and the
Yeah.
panic's going to feel even more difficult to navigate. And so, not just having the community, but being able to ground yourself in the community. That's what I work on a lot of like, who does make you feel safe? Who can you go to when you're freaking out and, they can validate and sit in it with you, but also remind you that you are okay right now
I love that.
if anything does happen in the future that is going to directly affect you, which unfortunately for people who are queer, it's probably going to happen at some point.
Yep.
But how can you navigate it together and remember that you aren't alone? And whether that is just me as your therapist or your podcast host, uh,
Yes.
or just your friend, just being able to remind yourself that you are in fact okay as who you are. Just you are accepted, you are loved, and you might not be safe everywhere, but that doesn't mean you're not safe anywhere.
Oh, I love that. That is so powerful. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you for what you do.
Seriously, though, it's so needed. Thank you. You're welcome. I don't know what to say. Yes to all of the things.
Yeah. But it's so
Yeah.
it's so challenging and it's so hard and I don't know, I've been thinking about representation a lot recently. And that's why I'm so glad that you and I are having this conversation right now because if if there's no representation, then anybody who has that identity is going to be like, well, I'm not normal. There is something wrong with me. I'm not supposed to exist. And then everybody who doesn't fit that identity is going to be like, no, you're not supposed to exist. But representation, the willingness for people to just exist in public and say, hey, no, yeah, I am here. Queer people are doing that more than we ever have.
Hmm.
And that's powerful, but that's also going to lead to the people that aren't used to it to like restrict and to try to push it down and repress it even
Yes.
further. And so it's this really hard dynamic of like, I need to celebrate the fact that like we've never been this visible. And this is amazing. Just across the world, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But also, that's going to create pushback and even more fear.
Yeah. I like how you see that. In trying to be positive. I also see it similarly whenever I get discouraged or I am with people who are feeling discouraged, which I find so extremely understandable. I I always think also what you just said is like, yeah, they are giving us a hard time and it seems to be harder and harder, but isn't that also because we are more out? We're more visible. We are more aware that there is more of us than maybe other people thought before or that ourselves thought before.
We're not invisible anymore.
Yeah, exactly. There's that also. There's that. That's very, very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you know, naming that even if in general we're not as invisible as we used to be, there's also this idea of invisible identity.
Mm-hmm.
And people might not even understand. Like, I have so many invisible identities, and people
Mm-hmm.
look at me the way I look. I'm a white woman with an American accent that is dating a man.
Mm-hmm.
I have invisible chronic pain. I am queer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't grow up in America. I grew up
Mm-hmm.
overseas. I'm a third culture kid. I didn't live in America till I was an adult. Like, nothing about me internally is the norm,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody looks at me and assumes I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just having a conversation earlier today with my friend who's bisexual, and she is with a man and also has kids. And we were talking exactly about what you just said. It's like, well, everybody reads me or can read me, especially if I'm with my partner and my family, as a completely normal heterosexual white woman with, yeah, nothing out of the norm. And it's not true, and how that feels internally also, no?
Yeah, it's this pressure to, you have the option to conform to that norm if you want to, but a lot of us don't want to. We want to be ourselves and be seen for ourselves.
Yeah. And also, we are not the norm.
Mhm.
Whether we act as if we were or we look as if we are not the norm, at least not for now.
Yeah.
And I think that's also very important to realize and to validate and to hug and embrace.
Okay, so speaking of the norm versus not the norm, I feel like there's all this pressure around monogamy compared to non-monogamy. And
Hmm.
a big shift has started happening with this conversation. And I know that this is something you're passionate about.
Yes, I am. I love this topic. I am definitely passionate about it. I feel like sometimes or too often it is seen as a one versus the other. So we're trying to say that monogamy is obviously the thing that everybody should do or how we should relate, or wait, I am more evolved than you because I am not monogamous, or things like that. And I so much disagree on that. And it's like, no, like there are different people, there are different relationships, and different types of relationships can go for different types of people. And I don't know, it's just like it doesn't have to be one or the other. And also, there are so many ways to relate to each other inside the category of monogamy and inside the category of non-monogamy. And it's like I feel like we summarize and simplify so much, which is very human to do. And I understand, like, it's economies of our brains, like we need to do that and we need to categorize and use some labels and stuff. But at the same time, it's like, please, let's just not stay there, and let's remember that we're way more than that, no? So like when we talk about monogamy, we all have many different ideas of what that means and images, and yeah, we've seen many examples of that. But that doesn't mean that the way that two people relate to each other in a so-called monogamous relationship is exactly the same and as a copy as these people who also say that they are monogamous, and so on, no? And that is something that I really like about people who start relating in a non-monogamous way. That is, all of that is taken for granted, that everybody knows what whatever is not so on the table. So you have to bring it up and say, hey, when you're talking about this, what do you mean? When you're saying that you would like to be non-monogamous, what does that mean? what are your ideas of that, no? And it's hard. It's very hard because it's like, wait, I don't, what are the options? Like, I don't even know many times, no? Like, we don't even have names or, yeah, more examples many times. But it's a given, kind of like the given is that we're going to have to talk about it. Whereas in
Hmm.
monogamy, many times the given is that, of course, everybody knows that whatever, no? Being loyal
Yeah.
means this. And it's like, no, not everybody thinks that way necessarily, you know?
Now that everybody has a different definition. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's very important.
Yeah. I mean, the words you use, like it's taken for granted. Everybody just assumes that monogamy means monogamy, but there's
Hmm.
so many different ways to show up in monogamy. It's like the assumption that committing to somebody means you're just physically going to stay in the relationship.
Hmm.
There's so much more to a commitment than just being there and never
Hmm.
leaving,
Yeah.
right? And I feel it's the same way with monogamy or non-monogamy.
Hmm.
And if you start taking it for granted or just making assumptions about what it means, well, then you're probably not on the same page, no matter
Hmm.
what your relationship structure is.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think that everybody takes this for granted. Like, of course, we all do, and we all have our ideas, and many times, many times, we don't even know that those are just our perspectives. It's just like how the world works, right? And but I think that being aware that we do that, even if we don't realize many times of exactly what is that we're thinking or how is reality or stuff like that, I think it's important because then we can start talking about the obvious. What are your obvious? What are my obvious? And are they the same? Most of the time they're not.
Yeah. So, non monogamy, kind of through your lens, almost opens the door to that
Yeah.
conversation, being more intentional about it, more mindful, and actually figuring out what your definitions are of these things
Yes.
rather than just moving through time not on the same page at all. It
Yes.
it is actively like helping us be aware of the fact that these conversations weren't happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It of course doesn't happen in every single relationship and stuff, but it's yeah, I see it more often than in people that call themselves monogamous and think that yeah, things are
Mhm.
obviously this way or the other, no?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm.
I am monogamous
Mm-hmm.
um, because I identify as asexual. It's like a whole thing. It's based in my values. It's been a very intentional choice. But when my partner and I committed to each other, I told him, I was like, we are going to be so intentional about this. We are going to talk about everything. We are going to define everything.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to check in all the time. And whenever I talk to my polyamorous friends about it, and I talk about like, well, yeah, no, he needs to have his friends. I can't check every box.
Mm-hmm.
No, he needs to be able to go out. Yeah, he has to go dance with his dance friends. Like, there's no way I can give him everything.
Mm-hmm.
And my poly friends, their reaction is typically like, well, that's how I define polyamory.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, yes, but I define it as monogamy because we're
Mm-hmm.
being intentional about it. And like the romantic stuff is for
Mm-hmm.
us, and the community is for all of
Mm-hmm.
us.
I love that definition. Yeah. There is something that is happening also with this, I'm going to call it a wave of non-monogamous or polyamorous people or movement that comes with people that identify themselves as monogamous, but that are not just taking things for granted and just like following a path that is like already there for everybody. And no, they're actually choosing very aware and very intentionally to be with just one person in this way and in this way and not in this way and not in this other way. And that is actually
Mhm.
creating whatever relationship makes you and your partner happy. And that's yes,
Yeah.
yes to that.
I love it so much because it's like it doesn't even matter what relationship structure you want, because whoever you end up being with, whether it's one person or multiple partners, you're building something so unique. And so it's like you said, it's not going to be the same as the person next door or the person down the street, even if technically on paper it's the same relationship structure. You need to build what works for you.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's very, very important. Hmm.
I've heard several people say, bringing it back to like queer
Yes.
identities, that the queer community is very good at being intentional about that
Mm-hmm.
and having those conversations. And many straight people I know, like, I learned what it meant to be intentional and have conversations about this from my queer
Mm-hmm.
friends. Like, they're already crushing sharing mental load. They're already talking about their interests or lack of interest or what they're okay with in terms of friendships or partners or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it, like, oh, again, it opens that door of, I didn't even know that was something we could talk about.
Mm.
And suddenly I'm being modeled healthy relationships for the first time thanks to the queer community.
I love
So
that.
I'm curious what you think about that.
I with this, I always wonder how much it's my own perspective, but in my perspective, in what I'm living or what I'm seeing others live is very much like that. Again, something that I find very, very often is that once you are out of the norm for whatever reason, it's easier many times to consider that some other parts of yourself or how you want to relate or how you see the world or how you relate to how others see you in this world or whatever else may also be out of the norm and that that could also be okay. I have also seen the opposite in the way of like, okay, I'm out of the norm here, and therefore I'm gonna like fight with everything that I have to be inside of the norm in everything else and make sure that this is the only thing that is abnormal about me so that I can be, again, included and be part of a community, even if I don't super feel identified in some ways, but of course I can connect in other ways. So yes, accept me as that, no? Which also valid, I think. Depending on how you do it, I guess. But it can be, I don't know, it's another option. But yeah, most often I see that once you open a door, then you domino effect keep on opening other doors and at
Yeah.
least considering them, no, and being more aware, more intentional about many things. It doesn't have to be that once you're queer then of course you're going to be polyamorous and of course you're going to be like, of course not. Absolutely
No.
not.
But you're willing to look at it and be curious about it and figure out what fits for you. Unless, like you said, that more protective reaction of, oh my God, it's not safe for me to even be this way. I can't look at anything else. I have to stay in this box and show up this way for myself.
Yeah, I think a key word that you just used is safe. Yeah, many times it can be even seen as a betrayal. No, it's like, yeah, you have this side of you that is out of the norm, but you're not fully embracing it because of everything else that you're doing or how you're living. And sure, that could be maybe in some cases, but what does what makes that person react like that so defensively? What makes you be out of the norm and not feel like you could fully embrace that part and maybe even consider other parts and maybe even reject them after considering them, but like and many times it has to do with the lack of safety or the sense of, yeah, danger, risk, threat that again in this world is very logical to feel that way, no?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you're not safe. Sometimes you do have to protect yourself, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think the challenge with that then is being able to recognize when the safety is
Mm,
there. Like, if someone has felt so unsafe for so long and had to show up a certain way, and then suddenly they're able, like they found safe people and they could explore, feeling like taking the risk to do that, to show up in that safe space.
Oof, that is so complicated though sometimes. I super agree. Yeah? I 100% agree. And at the same time, again, taking that risk may have to do with how brave you are, but it could also have something or everything even to do with your history and or your circumstances or how many times you have thought that you could be safe and you risked and then you fell so hard. And what are the abilities, the resources, the people, again, community that you have at hand that you can rely on if you fall. And I feel like
Mm.
many people either don't have those resources or feel like they don't. And I understand. I think it's very understandable, no? And I think also something that is very important is that if you do have some of those resources, maybe show up, maybe be patient, maybe show that you can be trusted if you feel like you can actually be trusted. Maybe keep on showing up so that you can become that safe space or that safe person for those people who don't believe in you, and that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do
Mhm.
with their experiences. And you, of course, you don't have to do that, but if you do have those resources and you want to do that, show up. Just do it, because that is also
Yeah.
how we create community. It's not like, oh, you've had some bad experiences, but come on, there's so much positivity out there. Risk again. It's like,
Mhm.
well, yeah, of course you have to at some point choose to risk, because otherwise it's really hard that you're going to find something different. But oh, it's so important. I was going to repeat myself. Yeah, that what I said.
Well, and let me repeat you because what you said there feels so important, not just for the person that's taking the risk to try to find that safety, but for the community on the other
Hmm.
side, the people who are safe, who want to be
Hmm.
safe, who want to help build that community. You can't just show up once and be like, well, they didn't take it, so I'm
Exactly.
just going to walk away. In order to be a safe person, you have to continue to show up in that safety
Hmm.
and that acceptance and recognize that not everybody's going to move on your
Hmm.
timeline or even be able to see that you are
Hmm.
safe until it is repeated so often that they can finally trust it
Yes.
and take that risk.
Yes. And that is key, because that is also how we
Yeah.
create meaningful connections and relationships and community, I think.
Yeah, continually showing up in that new pattern and building that new way of showing up.
Yeah. I agree. I think that that is one of the most important things in relationships is the showing up. Not only for others, also for yourself, but not only for yourself, also for others, not like it goes in that
Yeah.
interaction.
So let me ask you this, and maybe your own personal experience in your community. How do you know someone is showing up for you? Like, how do you feel safe?
Mm.
How do you know?
I've actually been reflecting on this a lot very
Mm.
recently, and I still have some questions opened. I still have no answers in all the aspects that I can think of this. But one of the things is that persistence, that actual presence, and another thing is, I guess, the tenderness, the tenderness of that vulnerability, and how you are there with who you are at the time, and that time is changing, and you will be more there or less there depending on many factors. But if you're still there, you are showing up. I don't know if that is clear, no? Like if you give your best, and your best is 1 out of 100, and you're still giving your best, then you are so much showing up. You're showing up so much, and you don't have to always give your best also, please. Like, don't put yourself in that situation, because that can be exhausting and impossible. But also that thing, I think, is also very important, no? Like, we live in a world that is always like more and more evolved and better and faster and whatever. Everything is more and more and more and more. And sometimes we can be shitty, but we can still be there. And sometimes we can't be there, and then we say, hey, I couldn't be there. And that is also showing up. So for me, and what I'm seeing in my communities, and with the people that I feel safe with, is not that you never hurt anyone. It's not that you can promise that you will never hurt anyone, or that you will never leave, or that you will never, I don't know, whatever promises that sound great you could make. It's not that. Is that you have the intention, first of all, and that you keep on trying to live through that, or live, I don't know how to say, it's not through that, live by that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing. Also, of course, the responsibility, no? Like, if you make a mistake, be open to realize that, to be told that, to think about it in a different way, and like keep on growing on your empathy maybe, and try to repair. How important, no? Repairing also. It's not like, oh, I made a mistake, so I guess I'll leave now, or I guess I'll throw you away because you made a mistake or you hurt me, so bye. Which again, very valid in certain situations. Like that is a completely yes, please do that if that's what you need. But also, how to like showing up is also for me trying to repair, and sometimes we don't know how to do that. Sometimes we have no idea, and like by trying, we're also like making more mistakes. But I think that's also, yeah, another way of showing up. It's like I have no idea what I'm doing, but I care so much about you and our relationship. I'm gonna keep on trying, whatever that means, and be
Like, I'm not giving up on
yes.
this. I'm just sitting with everything you said. And I mean, you're describing the human experience so beautifully
Oh,
because we're all just bumbling through life,
we
right?
are.
And sometimes we have really shitty days, and sometimes we're on point and we're on top of it. We can show up perfectly, and sometimes we can only give 1 out of 100.
Mm-hmm.
And the the important part in that you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, the word that keeps coming up for me is that authenticity. Like
Yes.
if you authentically can't show up and have to cancel your plans for a month, like that is you being authentic in that space, which, yeah, might not feel great in the moment for the people you're canceling on, but it also gives them permission to cancel on you if they're having a really bad day in the future, right? It's like I'm a safe person because I am showing up exactly the way that I need to in who I am. And I just want you to be able to do the same. Be human.
With honesty, no, in the end, that also has to do a lot with
Yeah.
honesty. Yeah, I think what you just said also with the example of canceling, it's so important. That also talks about limits and boundaries, and they
Mhm.
are so important for us humans to feel safe.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. Say more.
Right? It's like I feel like one of the things that makes me feel the safest and the most calm, I guess, with somebody else is when I say something like that, like, hey, I'm gonna actually cancel. I'm super tired. I need to rest, for example. And they're like, thank you so much for being honest with me and for taking care of yourself. I love you. We'll see each other some other time. It's like, thank you. No, and that's also what I
Oh
try
my
to
God.
do with
Yes.
others. Like, thank you. Yes, 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 yes. Set limits. Take care of
Yeah.
yourself. That also means taking care of the relationship.
Yes, it feels so good when you set a boundary or try like that
Mm-hmm.
rupture you were talking about, like trying to name, hey, this didn't feel good,
Mm-hmm.
or hey, I can't show up this way. Having somebody go, oh my God, yes, I hear you. I don't understand it, but I hear you
Mm-hmm.
and I can respect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is also so important. What you just said is like, I don't necessarily understand it. And we're going back to, I'm going to go back to queer people. Many people
Do it.
don't understand how queer people can exist. Like, I don't understand. Like, it breaks my brain. How can this be? How can a person be like this or whatever? It's okay. You don't have to understand everything to respect
Mhm.
it. You don't have to
Yeah.
understand other people's existence to respect it, to support it, even to love it if you want or if you can, you
Yeah.
know? And that is the same with
Yeah.
any other person or need or whatever. It's like you don't need to understand it. It can help understanding, sure, but you don't need to understand it to respect it or to praise it or to love it or to accept it.
No. You just need to have good
Hmm.
intentions and to recognize that we are all human and we need to share this
Yeah.
planet. That's it.
That's it. Yes. Yes.
End of podcast. Just kidding.
What else can we say after that?
Yeah, that was it. Uh,
Yes, 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 yes.
yeah.
Mm,
No, I think this is a very important conversation
mm,
because, like you said, it's systemic. It's all these different layers, and it isn't just how can I show up for myself,
mhm,
but it's how can I show up for the people in my
mhm,
life? How can I show up around strangers? And, how I show up with my best friend is going to be very different from how I show up with a stranger,
mhm,
but I can still show up with them
mhm,
as myself and holding space for them to be
Yeah.
themselves
Authentically.
without the expectation, right? Of like, this is who I am, so you have to show up this way.
Mm.
Instead, going, well, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Show me. Help me get to know
Yes, I
you.
love
I'm
that.
here for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. That connects me with like abundance and also with creativity. No, it's like things don't have to be a certain way. They aren't actually. And I feel like whenever people get very like attached to, but this is how things are. This is how things have always been, which is usually a lie, by the way. Not that they're trying to lie, but like it's usually not true. The things keep on changing.
Yeah, everything's
Um,
constantly
yes,
changing.
but
Yeah.
more often than now, than not, at least in what I see, is that when people get attached, very attached to those sentences, that kind of perspective of the world, is because they like maybe they are insecure in some kind of way that doesn't allow themselves to show up without that reinforcement of because this is how things are done. It's like if you need that, usually, maybe not in all cases, I cannot think of an example right now, but maybe not all cases, it's because you cannot say, this is how I would like to relate. This is what I need. This is how I see the world and how, I don't know, how I would like to walk in it. No, it's like, no, no, it's like, this is how things are. This is how you should also react or how you should also do things because this is how it is. And then if somebody comes and says, maybe not, or actually my existence tells you that no, that's not necessarily the way or the only way, then yeah, then people freak out, of course. Can't you imagine? Like you have
Yeah.
like everything structured and everything makes sense in your head and the contradictions you don't really look at and whatever. And then somebody comes and it's like crashes all of that, no? Like that must be so scary. I
Yeah.
understand.
It's like the world as you knew it is suddenly not making
Yeah.
sense. That is
Yeah.
terrifying. And to bring it back to the monogamy,
Mm-hmm.
non-monogamy conversation, like it's so hard to slow down, to be intentional,
Mm-hmm.
to notice when you're making an assumption.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you go, but this is just how it is. Well, that's an assumption that you've made through the lens that you see the world.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that everybody else is going to see it the same
Mm-hmm.
way. And you need to be able to be intentional, be mindful, have curiosity, ask questions about it, build a definition that actually
Mm-hmm.
fits for what you're
Mm-hmm.
viewing instead of trying to make what you're viewing fit
Mm-hmm.
the
Yes,
definition.
exactly. Exactly. Oof, that happens a lot with science, which I find
Yeah.
that sometimes is, I don't know how you live that in the States or like what people are saying about it. But here in Europe, or at least in Spain, I find that science is like the new God, the new religion, no? Like
Mm.
I do believe that science is extremely useful. I'm not against science at all. But I feel like so many people, yeah, talk about science as if it was the truth. No, it's like if this is not
Mm.
validated by science and proved by science, then it doesn't exist. And it's like, well, first of all, for science to be able to prove something, that something has to already be existing, because otherwise, how is science gonna measure anything or like, But
Mhm.
yeah, it feels like like a new religion. I don't know if you have any I don't know any experience with that. Like if you have heard.
So, uh, in very small doses, I have heard that, but I don't think America has quite gotten to the point where the majority of people believe in science yet,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, I don't know,
Like
maybe.
the voice that is loudest right now, unfortunately, is that science doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
that it is only faith that needs to be paid attention to. And often, if you back science, people are like, it doesn't matter. We're having a lot of conflict right now around vaccines. And just like, well, vaccines didn't used to be a thing. It's like, yeah, and a lot of people died.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like, well, there's risk to vaccines, so they're not worth taking. It's like, okay, but like 1 in 1,000 people versus 800 in 1,000 people
Mm-hmm.
dying because they're not taking vaccines. Like science has been so helpful in furthering our existence. And unfortunately, a large group right now don't believe in it at all. But I take your view on it where like science is so important, but also scientific method, right? You notice something that doesn't make sense, you build a hypothesis, and then you start testing it. And I do believe there's a lot in our world right now that doesn't quite make sense through science or through any other faith or belief you might have. And I honestly believe that we just don't have the tools to measure it yet. I think there's so much more to discover, and what we have right now is not the be all end all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I super agree.
There was a conversation that Bill Nye had with Steve Ham, some very religious man, and they did like a debate on whether or not God was real. And I think one of my favorite things that Bill Nye said over and over again during this debate was, if you give me evidence that is not made by man, if you can prove to me, I will change my mind. I will be religious today. Like, I am not sitting here saying he doesn't exist. I am saying that right now we don't have the evidence to back
Mm-hmm.
it,
I
right?
love that.
That your God exists. It's like, I will convert. I don't care. That's how I feel. It's like, I am down to change my mind. I am down to grow. I am down to understand the world differently.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I don't think right now we have all the
Mm-hmm.
answers.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't seem okay for so many people, but it is, I think.
Well, unknown is
Mm-hmm.
scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
It's
terrifying.
terrifying. Yeah. Uncertainty can be, yeah, so, so scary. I get that.
Yeah.
I also think that, I don't know what you think of this, but I think that a lot of course, I don't know the details of you at all. I just met you, but I feel like,
That's okay. Take a stab. I'm here
okay,
for it.
good. I think that a lot of our conversation has a lot to do with privilege. And we are talking a lot about taking a step into the unknown and risking and being able to hold space for the unknown and also for people who can't trust you yet, or all of those things. And I don't think that those things are necessarily only for the people who are privileged. God no.
Mhm.
But I also think that that could be something like that could be a factor that could be very much on the table on this. Not like maybe if you don't have certain, I don't know, circumstances or privileges, I'm going to say, or conditions in your life, then maybe you don't have the ability or the room or the energy or whatever to even open your mind or to keep on showing up in a way that can be meaningful for somebody who will then decide to stay. Or, like I feel like privilege has so much to do with everything that we're saying. Also, I don't know what you think.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. We are so on the same page because if you don't feel safe going there because of your environment or the lack of those resources, or maybe you're actively in an abusive situation, you aren't going to have the space to explore. And the thought of trying something different, it doesn't feel safe. And so it truly is that privilege of safety. And my mind is thinking to like a more innocuous example. So like I grew up overseas. I'm a third culture kid. And because I grew up overseas, I grew up as a racial
Mm,
minority. I grew up where everyone was staring at me. And if I put a hat on, I was blonde when I was younger, they would like rip
mm,
the hat off and just play with my hair without talking to me or asking me. I was constantly a minority experiencing that. But the only reason I was able to experience being a racial minority is because I had socioeconomic
mm-hmm.
privilege. I was able to live overseas. I was able to have those experiences.
Yeah.
And I am incredibly lucky to have had that privilege so that I could even have that
Mm-hmm.
experience. And it's just that intersectionality of it, even though you have this one identity, and yeah, maybe people are sitting there going, be yourself, be authentic, be true, go explore, find your people. Yeah, but how?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it might take you a long time before you're able
Mm-hmm.
to, because there's so many other pieces of your identity or your experience or your upbringing that prevents you from going
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah. No, I super agree. And I'm also going to go back to something that you said in the beginning of our conversation, that is the importance of representation. I feel like the more people that can show themselves to the world as whatever, as queer, as non-monogamous, as disabled, as proudly fat, I don't know, the more people that can know without having to go out of their circumstances that those are options also, that they are valid, that that we exist, that they are not the only ones feeling that way, or loving that way, or experiencing those experiences. No, and I think that is so important, because not everybody has the energy or the resources or the whatever to be able to go search actively for those answers or for those people. And I think that representation is so important also, among many other reasons, because of that.
Oh, yeah, that's so powerful. And one sentence you said in there of just, you're valid. You're valid. You get to exist. You get to take up space. You are beautiful and you are loved simply because you are you, and you don't have to change anything about that in order to be valid. You just are.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for holding this space.
Yeah, I am so grateful that you agreed to join me today. And as we're at the end of our hour here, I'm curious if our listeners could take one thing away from this conversation, what would you want them to remember?
I mean, you just gave a short, very powerful speech, and I think that that would be the thing that I would love for everybody to remember, is that you are valid, however you are, with all of your imperfections, with all of your mistakes, with all of your fuck ups. Like, you are valid, you are okay, even if it doesn't feel always okay. You're okay, you're valid, and you're also not alone. You're super not alone.
I feel like I needed to hear that.
Well, that goes for you also, Anastasia.
We're in this together, Julia.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Yes, exactly. Yeah. What would you choose if you wanted just one last message, or I don't know, yeah.
It's a great question.
I agree. It was your question. I think it's really good.
I'm going to do the same thing you did, because you added to my little speech the idea that you're not alone. There are people out there who share parts of your identity. We're all unique. We're all our own person, but also we're not alone. And there are people out there who can see you, who can accept you, who can validate you. And maybe they're not in your world yet, but that doesn't mean that they're not there.
Yes, I love that.
All right. Thanks for coming on Insights with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Julia is a bright light in this world of chaos and uncertainty. And I loved how, as we talked about building community, she and I were able to form a connection and foster safety in the way that we were talking about. I don't think that I can say anything that would top the natural end to this episode, so I'm just going to repeat it. You are not alone. Your community is out there. I'm going to say it one more time because we all need to hear it. You are not alone. Hopefully something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. You can find Julia also on social media at julia.viani. That is at the @ JULIA_VIANI. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. You can also find Insights with Us on Substack for exclusive content, including videos, transcripts from these episodes, which will slowly be released, and other writings about my insight journey. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for being a part of my community, and thank you for creating insight with us.